Hey, it's Tyler, host of the Tyler Knows Everything podcast, where the nose is crossed out because I always want to learn more. Before you listen to this episode on the history of pandemics with Brian Shajari, please listen to the following public service announcement from the Center for Disease Control.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19.
Furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters and this podcast.
Tyler
knows
everything.
Like it, love it, share it.
Smash that like button.
Smash it.
You know, this podcast is going to take at least an hour, but it only takes 1 second to like.
That's right.
But yeah, so I'm here with Brian. We're going to talk about the history of pandemics. You know, as humans spread across the world, so have infectious diseases. Even in this modern era, outbreaks are nearly constant, though not every outbreak reaches pandemic level as the novel coronavirus COVID-19 that we're living in right now. So appreciate you for braving the elements and coming on. You're an essential, government employee and reservist of the Coast Guard. So I know you've been out and about a little bit, but we didn't shake hands. We're sitting across the table.
That was weird. I've never done that before with people.
Yeah, it is awkward, because you grow up as a man learning to shake a guy's hand, look him in the eye, and it's like a trust thing as well. If you're going to do a business deal with somebody, you're not going to shake their hand anymore, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
that is probably one of the things I miss the most is shaking somebody's hand, and you can't do that right now.
Yeah, human contact in general with your friends. And down here in the South, we're very friendly and hugs and things like that. So I know you put together some impressive notes and you're a history buff as well.
Yeah.
So let's go back through some of the more deadly plagues.
Well, so my fiance and I did a lot of research on this, and as an amateur historian, by no means I'm a real historian, but certainly not a medical person by trade either. But
I should probably point out that I'm merely in costume at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I can actually stick my finger through these glasses. They're not. But for the month of April, the lab coat stays on.
It should. It absolutely should. Yeah, you should. Everybody right now should be taking some heightened precautions. I mean, at first it was kind of in January, you didn't really take it too seriously.
Right.
And then things started spiking. And where we are right now, today's, I don't even know what day of the week it is. Thursday?
It is Thursday. I had to run outside after the garbage truck because I hadn't put the can out yet. And luckily I made it.
It's March 33rd, right?
It is.
Right,
March 97th.
Okay. Yeah. So
it's a tough year, but we made it.
And what we're finding is where we are today, we weren't there yesterday. It seems to be steadily getting worse. And, by the time this airs, sometime this weekend, who knows where we'll be. And hopefully this will, I hate to say it, but I hope this peaks and it starts to go down really quick because it's affecting so many aspects of our daily lives. People like you and I that are extroverts, I've been locked up for weeks and it hurts.
Yeah.
But businesses, the economy, people just living their daily lives, I hope that this sort of levels out after a while and our elected officials find a way to kind of compromise and make sure that everything's, even killed and there's that flatten the curve, mentality above, with everybody. So
for sure. And luckily in today's time, communication gets out very quickly.
Really quick.
Unfortunately for these folks, we're going to learn about not so much.
Yeah. So if you want to dig in history, sicknesses, pandemics have been rampant since really the beginning of time. And, everybody talks about the Black Plague. It's when the Roman Empire was really, the It was the famous Black Death. After the Roman Empire had collapsed, the world kind of went into this dark age. And we call it the dark ages for a reason, because you had the Black Plague. You had kind of a backwards mentality thinking. You had a lot of people that weren't really looking to science. They weren't looking to common sense to really get rid of a lot of things that the Romans had advanced us with. You know, the Romans were really big on hygiene. They were big on medical. They were big on building civilization. You know, for example, just kind of the lowest examples of that is all Roman soldiers were trained to build roads, and they were trained in medical. So, you know, they would absorb people into military service and into conscription, but they would train them to be useful citizens whenever it came out. Whenever they came out.
I visited the ancient Roman city of Bath, and
it's beautiful.
It's
in England,
an ancient health spa, and they had the hot baths and the cold baths. Like, you know how we have our friends that work out, that go to cryotherapy or that go to sauna, where they were doing that back then naturally, and adding salt.
Absolutely,
and minerals to the water.
Bath is the Roman massage envy, and being a Roman soldier was a Roman CrossFit. So,
that's right.
You know, it was, you know, they recognize this, but after the Roman Empire collapsed, as early as 1347, we saw a sort of major downturn in, you know, hygiene, engineering, advanced thinking, stuff like that. And some of the earliest plagues came on ships from the Black Sea, and they hit Sicily, Italy, where, of course, unfortunately, right now is a huge hotspot for the coronavirus.
Right.
And as a student of history, I'm seeing some of the same similarities sort of repeat itself, and we see this every couple hundred years. History repeats itself on a timeline. And we're starting to see that now, especially if you compare the coronavirus to the Black Plague. It's being transmitted through transportation, through ships, through people interacting with each other that aren't taking it quite as seriously.
Yeah, and I think that unlike the coronavirus, the bubonic plague or the Black Plague was more of a bacterium virus.
Yeah.
It looks like it was Yersinia pestis. And 1 to 7 days after exposure to the bacteria, people would have flu-like symptoms.
Yep.
They include fever, headaches, and vomiting, swollen and painful lymph nodes. That was kind of what it was most known for, was the swollen lymph nodes occur in the area closest to where the bacterium entered the skin. And then those swollen lymph nodes would break open. That's awful.
It was disgusting.
And so this is one of those things where, as a society or as a planet, the population was steadily increasing until this plague.
Yeah.
And it took centuries to repopulate the death toll.
And that's a very good point, because if you study the Black Plague, you'll see that after the plague had ended and after Europe had recovered, of course, it killed 60% of Europe. It killed half the population of Italy. But in the end, what it did was, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but it created the Renaissance era. And through the Black Plague, there was a shortage of labor because everybody died from it. So we saw inventions, farming inventions. We saw new thinking with innovation with regards to how can I put a machine to work, and what it took 3 laborers to do.
Right.
You know, people were starting to forward think after that. And you know, I hope after this all ends, we can kind of see ourselves in a kind of a modern renaissance, because lately we've been FaceTiming with each other. We've been getting back to the basics of home life. You know, we've been forcibly spending time with our family, which can be a bad thing, but you know, in many cases, it's like you're getting back to the, you know, really the core values of what being a family is.
Yeah, there have been more people walking outside, walking their dogs.
Oh, absolutely,
The dogs are like, what's going on? You're walking me 3 times a day now.
Yeah, my dog has no idea what to do because I'm actually home now versus traveling as a defense contractor. I was on the road constantly.
Yeah, for me, mandatory from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., I'm on my bike doing, 5 to 6 miles. I would never do that if I love doing that, but I wouldn't have the time to do it if it weren't under these circumstances.
Right.
And I'm mostly going to trails. I'm by myself. There's
Right.
nobody around. And if I see people in a neighborhood, we're clearly far enough away to where it's not affecting me.
And this isn't the first time in history this has happened. During the Black Plague, there was quarantines that were put into place from sailors that came off ships from certain ports throughout Europe whenever they come into Italy or any other area within Europe. Some of the local governments, even back then, we're talking almost 600, 700, 800 years ago, instituted quarantines. And in fact, some of the earliest ones were in Venice, where sailors would come in and they would dock, and the local government said, okay, you're on lockdown for 30 days. And if you exhibit any symptoms, well, back then they didn't have any medical help. They were just like, you die on your own, and that was it. And so, again, as a student of history, we're seeing a repeat of that. Of course, now we have the, medicine to treat people, but being in quarantine isn't a new mindset. It's not something Governor Abbott thought of 4 weeks ago. It wasn't something that, the president thought of. This has been around since the beginning of time. So,
yeah, that's interesting. The social distancing isn't a new concept. I know like many people, as I've been watching Contagion and Outbreak and I Am Legend, while I'm at home, I got this time just because it's kind of the theme of things. And I think Contagion was it was early 2000s. It was, Outbreak is in the 90s. And in Contagion,
28 days too.
Yeah, in Contagion, Lawrence Fishburne is like the head of the CDC. He's doing a press conference, and he mentioned social distancing, and I'd never really heard the term officially until now. That's like the buzzword of here recent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking at this. This is kind of like the top 4 pandemics that by death toll, and it says the of the bubonic plague, it estimates around 200 million.
That's a lot of people.
And that's just specifically for this time period of 1347 through 1351. There was actually several other outbreaks, that were smaller, and they were kind of mixed in with smallpox and bubonic plague together. So who knows the actual total death toll?
Yeah, we'll probably never know what the real number was.
Yeah. And just like we're seeing with the coronavirus, it originated from a bat and then jumped species to a human. Well, the bubonic plague originated in rats and then spread to humans through infected fleas.
Yep. And it was spread through coughing, sneezing, kind of the same symptoms that we warn people about today.
Is that the pandemic where the bird mask came from?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the famous one that I think you see
usually in Halloween stores. But that was the doctors that wore those, right?
It was, yeah. And there were actually, there were very rare cases of people that did survive the Black Plague. In fact, there was a French doctor, and I forgot his name. I think it was Chevalier. He had survived the Black Plague, and I read up on this, and he was just doing common sense things like he did self isolation for a month. He drank nothing but water, ate healthy, reasonably healthy for back then. You got to think food back then was different than it is now, because now we have hormone injected food, and most of it's chemically balanced and stuff. But back then they had pure meat, you had pure eggs, things like that. Things that we consider organic nowadays is all they ate back then. So it was probably healthier for you. But he did a self-isolation, and he actually got over the plague, and he wrote his memoirs in detail, and wrote what the symptoms he had and how he treated his patients, because he built up immunity to it, and he started treating patients in France that had gotten it. So
it's always interesting to me thinking of what we have now versus what they have then, and
horrible.
How there's different mixtures where some are better and some are worse. Like they didn't have processed food, but they also didn't have
air travel.
That and they didn't have hygiene practices that were as good as ours. They didn't have soft drinks, but they also didn't have good modern plumbing and water treatment services.
Yeah.
They didn't have technology and video games and things to make them. They had a lot more manual labor and physical prowess, but they also didn't have technology to help them with medical side of things.
Exactly. So your mental health back then would probably collapse versus what it is now, because now you can get on your phone and get away from it, or you can go do whatever in your neighborhood. Whereas back then it was, people turned to a lot of false religion. They were thinking God was punishing them, things like that.
Yeah, the wrath of God.
Yeah,
especially from some of the early ones. And it looks like I wanted to mention the very first record of a plague, which some of them probably date back to the Bible times. But for a medical record, it looks like 165 A.D., which was the Antonine plague, or the plague of Galen, which is the name of the Greek physician that was living in the Roman Empire who described it. And it was an ancient pandemic brought to the Roman Empire by troops returning from campaigns in the Near East. Scholars have suspected it to have been either a combination of smallpox or measles. They're not quite sure. And it claimed the life of a Roman emperor, Lucius Verus, who died in 169 AD and was the co-regent of Marcus Aurelius.
Oh,
and
wow.
Antonius. And so I guess that's where the plague got its first name. Antonius has become associated with the epidemic. The epidemic, or the disease rather, broke out again 9 years later, according to a Roman historian, causing up to 2,000 deaths a day in Rome. 1/4 of those who were affected giving the disease a mortality rate of 25%. Wow.
Gosh.
So, we're hearing about
4% for coronavirus.
Right,
I think,
yeah.
Or 3 to 4%.
Total deaths are estimated to have been about 5 million, and it devastated the Roman army and was one of the lead-up things of the collapse of the Roman Empire. That's very scary to hear, because at that time the Romans were what we were, or what we are now, to the world.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing this economic downturn of the United States and spiraling out of control.
We saw Rome collapse in 219, which wasn't that much further down the road from the timeline. So, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but...
Yeah, I mean, the United States is not that old. We're only...
200 and something?
Yeah, 200 and, plus, 1996.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're watching, you're good at math.
But at some point in history, almost every country was in charge of the planet at some point, if you go back far enough. The Mongols, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians.
Yeah. And it's throughout history we're seeing this sort of pattern with civilizations kind of go through this. The British Empire went through it, the Roman Empire went through it, France went through it. Every world power that you can think of has gone through some sort of phase like this. So,
Well, the second most deadly plague was smallpox, and that was from 1520, and the death toll is estimated to be 56 million. And that's just from that particular pandemic. As we know, smallpox has been sprinkled in throughout other different plagues and commingled. It's smallpox is another one where the inoculation for smallpox appears to have started in China around the 1500s. And then Europe adopted this practice from Asia in the first half of the 18th century. And then in 1796, we were able to get a smallpox vaccine. And smallpox was rough, especially for the looks of things. The guy on the Fantastic Four that turns himself into a rock,
Yeah.
it kind of looked like that. Smallpox was an infectious disease caused by 2 virus variants. And the last naturally occurring case was diagnosed in 1977. And the World Health Organization basically claimed global eradication of the disease in 1980, thanks to modern vaccinations.
Yeah, smallpox is a very ugly sickness. I mean, it's obviously the coronavirus, Black Plague, gives off their symptoms, but that's that's where the boils come all over your skin, and smallpox throughout history. I mean, even as modern as the 19th century, we've seen countries, we've seen empires, we've seen armies intentionally infect things with smallpox and give them to their rival civilization or people that they want to eradicate. Sadly, in our history, one of the saddest parts of American history is the eradication of the Native Americans out of America, and we used some of those tactics against them, which is again a very bad thing. But civilizations have done that. The Greeks did it. The Romans did it. I mean, the Chinese have done it. Smallpox has been intentionally spread and unintentionally spread.
Yeah, because the Native Americans were by themselves for so long.
When they got exposed to this, they had no idea what to do.
Right,
So.
and their bodies hadn't built up any type of immunity. It was the first time their cells and their tissue had ever experienced something like that, whereas the Europeans, they had already been living on top of each other.
Yeah.
In close communal cities, sharing water. They had already shared multiple diseases and gone through multiple pandemics, whereas the Native Americans had lots of free roaming land, spent a lot of time outside.
Yeah, and you see smallpox that sort of took the Black Plague spot, because the Black Plague was the Dark Ages, and you had the Renaissance, Age of Sail, Age of Exploration, and that's when, we had Columbus, we had all the explorers sailing for Portugal, Spain, England, and they were all coming to the New World and spreading that sickness amongst the populations, and it just sort of kept going.
Right.
So
the third most deadly pandemic is the Spanish flu.
that's our most recent one we've had to deal with.
Yeah, the early 19th century, so 1918 through 1919. So just 1 year ravaged about 40 to 50 million.
And you got to think, 1918, we were coming out of the First World War. The whole world was already exhausted. The British Empire collapsed. The United States had lost so many troops, in Bellawood and all over France, and we were just worn out as a nation. And then this hit, and it's like now you can't think of any worse time, especially now we have election season. We have worldwide conflicts going on. So you see sort of this kind of correlation, with the two. So it's very interesting to study the Spanish flu in correlation to what we're going through now, almost 100 years later.
Yeah, it looks like although it killed 40 to 50 million, there was about 500 million people that it infected in that 1 year time, and that's about a quarter of the world's population at that time.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know what we are as of today with the coronavirus with deaths, but it's close to 50, I think.
Yeah, I know as of April 1st, the death toll was 45,000.
Yeah.
And then today's April 3rd. Hey, maybe Heather can check on
Hey,
today's.
Hey, Google.
But yeah, like we were talking about with World War II and Spanish flu, to maintain morale, World War One, they like you had Germany, United Kingdom, France, United States. The newspapers were free to report the epidemic's effects in neutral Spain, and there was an illness of one of the kings, and people were using. This is kind of the first pandemic of media, right, with newspapers and propaganda being used, during wartime. They would use some inadequate data to identify certain pandemics' geographic origins and blaming other countries, and sometimes we see that today still going on.
Oh, right now the U.S. and China are going at each other for blaming each other for the coronavirus, and trying to say that one country didn't do a good job at responding, the other one started it, and it's again, you go back to the Spanish flu in 1918, it's the same correlations. We're seeing the same things.
Yeah, and Spanish flu is also basically H1N1.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then the second version of it was the swine flu, which
Right.
was 2009.
Right.
And most influenza outbreaks disproportionately kill the very young and the very old, with the higher survival rate. Oh, did she get it?
Yeah, I can't see it from here.
Not global or US?
Global.
Global cases 1,200,159.
It's a little over 1 million cases right now.
So deaths 51,485.
So we're up to 51,000
51,000
today
okay.
as of
Yeah.
right now. So and that's a lot of people.
And one thing I'm concerned about is there's a statistic from China that was from a reliable news source that said China, of course, has reported 3,300 deaths. This is about a week ago, I guess. However, from January to March, they've had 21 million cell phone users that just vanished from the grid.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because we've never had that type of data before. If a person dies, then their cell phone probably dies too. Or a family member destroys it because they've died from a disease, and that was on their face. They're breathing on it every day. So that was probably destroyed. The government probably destroyed it. And that's the thing about China is they run the show. They make up the news. They don't have freedom of press, freedom of speech like we do. So whatever they say, there's no checks and balances.
Yeah,
so
there's a total, complete monopoly on everything coming out of there.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people you cannot believe, people are saying right now, as of April 2nd today, that, China said they've eradicated, it's gone, they're back to normal now. You really can't believe things that China puts out, because we've seen historically that everything that their state news agencies, state-run agencies puts out is generally a little biased or not true.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking from an objective point of view.
Right.
So people have to be careful with that information.
I think we'll definitely see a trend to try to manufacture more things here in America. I was happy
Yeah.
to see some of the American-made car companies step up and make ventilators.
Yep.
Dyson made ventilators. Tesla Motor
Mm-hmm.
Company, which is an American car company that never received a bailout, similar to Ford.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk said all these ventilators are free on the condition that they go to patients who need them and not stockpiles.
Right. Yeah. And that's, the last time we saw that, I think, was in World War II when the president signed in the Defense Production Act,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of neat that we're doing that, because I own a lot of World War II weapons that are stamped General Motors. I have an M1 carbine that says Ford Motor Company on it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and to me, seeing us repeat that resolve that we have as Americans, we don't accept defeat. It doesn't exist in our vocabulary. Failure is not an option.
Yeah.
And that's neat seeing that same mentality carry over almost 80 years later from that sort of blitz spirit that some of my British ancestors lived through, and seeing it applied now. Everybody's in a part. We have people making masks at home and giving them to, either doctors or hospitals, or, some of the organizations that are out there like United Way,
Yeah.
that are out there on the front line every day. We see car companies switching to making ventilators. We see people doing their part, people supporting local businesses, just things on the home front that is sort of resilient to making sure that we come out of this somewhat. We're going to come out of it bruised up, but
Yeah.
we're not going to be crippled.
It is very similar to World War II in the sense of we won World War II because we decided as a country we were going to
Exactly.
win. People had the victory gardens
Yeah.
because they wanted the troops to have food.
Yep.
People bought war bonds. There were all these measures, recycling programs to build battleships and every rubber drives, paper drives, everything that people were doing back home. And now we're at war with an invisible enemy. And it's kind of the same come together spirit.
It is, and it's kind of different because we can't go out and socialize and congregate and do what things that we used to do to make sure those businesses stayed alive. But, like we said earlier, we're finding ways to adapt to that. We're finding ways to keep that somewhat normal, that routine still going, to where we don't have to, completely shut it out. So,
Well, here is the fourth most deadly pandemic in history, called the Plague of Justinian from 541 to 542 AD.
I'm assuming that was in the Byzantine Empire.
Yes, that's right.
If it was Justinian, okay.
Yeah, the Byzantine, and its especially its capital, which was Constantinople.
Constantinople, which is in
Constantinople.
Ankara now. Yeah, it's in Turkey, modern day Turkey.
Okay,
One of
yeah.
my favorite empires in history.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and
Byzantines.
so there were some port cities around the Mediterranean Sea. Merchant ships harbored rats, and the rats carried fleas. And here we go with these rats again.
Yeah, fleas and rats.
That's probably what New York's problem is. There's more rats than there are people. And the rats and the fleas that were infected with the plague, some historians believe the plague was one of the deadliest pandemics in history, resulting in the deaths of 25 to 100 million people. It was 2 centuries of recurrence, so it happened again in 750 AD, and the death toll again was half of Europe's population. I wonder how many times Europe has been wiped out.
So many times.
And so in 2013, researchers confirmed earlier speculation that the plague of Justinian was in fact Yersinia pestis, which was the Black Plague. So that was probably the first instance of the Black Plague. We just didn't call it that because some of these pandemics have themes, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that was before the Crusades even started, because the first Crusade wasn't until 1090, and the Crusades, there was, I think, almost 15 Crusades, a little over a dozen. And, they were trying to go back to Jerusalem, recapture the Holy Land. But while they were en route, they would sack European cities and they would spread sickness, smallpox. That's where smallpox kind of started to kind of take a light on the stage. The Black Plague was still sort of fresh and coming about and kept having repeats. And I think we have a list of a few other ones here that just kept coming and coming. And that was because of traveling. And that's what we're dealing with now. Again, kind of correlate. you had the Crusades, you had all these military age men traveling from Western Europe into Asia, where it was kind of a hot spot, and they were bringing it back with them, or they were bringing it with them into Europe. So it was just a constant, Europe couldn't really win during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
They were just really kind of screwed from that vantage point. So
Yeah, for sure. And so the fifth most deadly plague would be the most recent one for us, or not the most recent, but the most recent in the top 5, and that would be HIV and AIDS.
yeah, and that was during our time area in the early '80s, late '70s.
Yeah, I was born in '82. I
me
think you
too.
were as well. AIDS started in 1981, and this was the first disease or first pandemic where Dr. Fauci had just taken on that government position.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't know he was 80 years old.
Yeah, that guy's old. He doesn't look like it.
And I was listening to The Daily from the New York Times, a little 30-minute update podcast. And right now he's having to basically work all day, go to bed around midnight, and then wake up every morning at 4:30. And I mean, that would be tough for me to do. And everything that he's doing in a day. And a lot of them are doing that. And none of them look tired. So you really got to hand it to the public officials.
They are doing their level best. I mean, they're faced with it's like you said, an invisible enemy that we can't see. Being from Southeast Texas, we are used to spaghetti models, and when's it going to hit? When can I go back to work?
Yeah,
Usually it's
we know
within
how
a
to
week
deal
or
with a
two.
hurricane,
Yeah.
right?
We are resilient. We come together. We help our neighbor build our houses back together.
Yeah.
Whatever.
California knows how to deal with earthquakes.
Yeah, and wildfires. Yeah.
Florida knows how to deal with hurricanes. We know how to deal with flooding and hurricanes.
Yeah.
And the North knows how to deal with snowstorms.
Yeah.
Like we would be in trouble if we had a snowstorm. We don't know what to do. We don't have the right.
Yeah, we did that in
equipment.
2008, and nobody knew how to drive.
No, not at all. I went to the nearest sauna.
Yeah, everybody took
safest
off
place
work.
to-
Oh wow, it's snow. I'm like, I hate this stuff. It's
Yeah.
horrible to drive in.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
But,
so
yeah.
for HIV/AIDS, this one is another one that started with an animal. It started with monkeys,
Mm-hmm.
and it jumped species to a human. And this one's primarily spread by blood and bodily fluids. So it was the first one that was more common as a sexually transmitted disease, and it could be any sex too.
Yeah.
Or oral or what have you, any hole.
Yeah.
It's going to get you. Or blood transfusions. They had a homeless population that was sharing needles, because they were using drugs intravenously, and they would pass it just like they would pass a joint. They would pass the needle. That transmitted HIV. Also, if a pregnant mother has it, she's going to pass it along to her
Right.
unborn baby.
And again, Europe in the 1980s, early 80s, what were we going through? We were going through the Cold War. We were going through some of the really heightened days between East and West Germany, and then all of a sudden this, the AIDS outbreak hits Western Europe, West Germany, East Germany alike, and again, correlating the coronavirus to that, it was just a really bad time geopolitically for this stuff to break out. Because again, heightened global tensions, and it seems to be throughout history. Every time we have one of these pandemics, something crazy is going on. There's never really any. Okay, well, this is going to be a normal time. I'm just going to go ahead and break out now, and everybody will deal with it and be over with it. But right now, we're dealing with tensions with Asia, tensions in the Middle East, and we've taken a sidestep from that stuff. Because we're not looking at it in the news every day, but it's still there. It still exists. There's still issues going on. And we just need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and I'm looking here. So we've got 5, 6, 7, 8.
What was the
9,
most
10,
recent one? Was it
12,
H1N1?
13, 16, 17, 18, 19. So there's 20 that I'm looking at that are the heavy hitters, and we don't know if any of them came from a biological terror weapon. It's possible that some of them could, but we don't know. We've never.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
And if we do, it'll be beyond our lifetime.
The only things that we know for sure is like anthrax has been used for
Right.
terrorism. What is there
was-
anything else that?
That was the post 9/11 world where we saw, I think it was Tom Daschle received a letter that was literally infected with anthrax, and he was a lab worker, I think, a defense lab worker.
Yeah.
Heather can answer. She's a chemical weapons expert, but He was a lab worker, and he intentionally put that anthrax powder in that envelope and mailed it off. I think Tom Brokaw got one too, and Dan,
Yeah.
all the big wigs during the post 9/11 world.
But
received one.
most recent, besides COVID-19, would be MERS, MERS, because it hasn't completely ended. It started in 2012, and
Still going.
and yeah, it's to present, and then of course HIV/AIDS is also considered to present because we still have
Yeah.
people that are contracting AIDS.
That will never go away.
Yeah, unfortunately. But just to give everyone a perspective here, so you if you got number one, you've got the Black Death, bubonic plague, 200 million death toll, and then you go all the way down to number 20, which would be SARS, which is about 770. That was 1 year.
Yeah.
2002 to 2003. So I'll kind of break these down for everybody. So from largest death toll to smallest. So starting at number one is the bubonic plague. Number two, smallpox. Number three, Spanish flu. Number four, plague of Justinian. Number five, HIV/AIDS. Number six is what's called the third plague.
Yeah.
That's just a combination of multiple plagues.
That was in
1855. Yeah. Number seven, the Antonine plague. That's that first one that I mentioned from 165 AD, 5 million
France.
people. And number eight, the 17th century Great Plagues. Again, that's another combination. Some of them are just kind of grouped together like that. They don't have a specific name. And let's see, 5, 6, 7. Number nine is the Asian flu. 1.1 million, 1957. Number 10 is the Russian flu. I can't believe the Russians had any illness. I thought they were immune to
They
anything.
just drink vodka.
I did not think anything could kill the Siberians. But they've got vodka,
65% alcohol, right?
snow, and sauna. They should be good. This one was 1889 to 1890.
They
I'm
have
sure
borscht too. Borscht for the soul.
I'm sure they recovered quickly. 11 is Hong Kong flu,
Oh.
and this 1968. And they, again, you've got Spanish flu, Hong Kong flu, Asian flu. I don't think we should get hung up in.
So you have all these strains of the flu then throughout history.
Exactly. Number 12 is cholera, and that was just a cholera 6 outbreak, 1817. Number 13 is the Japanese smallpox epidemic. That was pretty early, 735 AD.
Okay.
And 14 is the 18th century Great Plagues. That was, of course, after the 17th century Great Plagues, just a combination, 600,000. So we're down, we just left the last one at 1 million death toll, Japanese smallpox, and we're down to the next one, which is 600,000. And the next one would be the swine flu,
I remember
2009.
that was going around.
Yeah,
I was
2009,
at the-
2010. That's a version of Spanish flu,
Yeah.
a version of H1N1, 200,000. The late 1800s, we had yellow fever. That was between 100 to 150,000.
Which in Beaumont, there was a massive yellow fever outbreak in 1863 during the U.S. Civil War. And there's a lot of documentation about it. So Southeast Texas isn't new to pandemics. So,
And that brings me to number 17, which is where we are now,
Where we are now, yeah.
COVID-19. Like I said, this was at 45,000 back on April 1st, 2020. Now we're up to around 50,000 on the death toll. Or if you believe those cell phone records, 20 million. And number 18 was Ebola. Remember that one?
I remember Ebola.
What a nasty one,
That was
right?
bad, yeah.
Yeah.
that was the one where
It liquefied your
Yeah,
insides.
that was horrible.
And you started bleeding out of your eyeballs.
Oof.
2014 to 2016. That was about 11,000. And then number
Mirrors.
19 is MERS. That's kind of like hands in hands with SARS, I believe. Some of these smaller ones I didn't get a whole lot of data on. I kind of just went for the.
So if
the
you
big
look
ones.
at that chart, I know no one can really see it if they're listening, but
I'll throw up a graphic.
if you look at this graphic, and I'm not trying to by no means be political here because I never do that, but if you look at where we are with COVID-19, even as of today, April 2nd, I don't know where we're going to be a month from now. I don't know where we're going to be in May or June or July. I don't know where we're going to be a year from now when we record the 1 year anniversary of this. But we're still very, very, very low on the charts. Now, should we stop taking this seriously? Absolutely not. This needs to be taken very seriously, and I think our elected officials are finally starting to make the right decisions and make sure that it's pounding in our heads. Hey, you got to do this. Just let's just get it over with. But we're still very, very low in comparison to what has almost wiped out the entire planet.
Yeah.
So keep taking it seriously. Again, I don't know where we're going to be, but it's still something just to be mindful of, is that we're doing a good job in comparison to history. And I'm going back to episode 8 when I was here before, where, bringing the history part in, where we can learn from ourselves. And I think this is a perfect opportunity. We can learn from ourselves and really make a huge difference. And I think we're doing a good job of that.
Yeah, I think you should always ask yourself, are you better off than your grandparents?
Exactly.
And the answer would be absolutely yes.
Should always be
in,
yes.
In many ways,
Yeah.
we are. Even though our grandparents were the greatest generation, hands down, we definitely have it, better than them.
Way better.
Yeah.
Way better. But just to kind of harp on that, what I said earlier was, after the Black Plague, during the 14th century, and even almost after every major plague you've seen, especially the Spanish flu, smallpox, you've seen a rebirth. That's what gave way to the Renaissance era. That's what gave way to forward thinking, engineering, going back to what the Romans had started.
That's where
hygiene.
Leonardo da Vinci had many inventions.
Yeah.
And you had Copernicus. And
Yes, yeah, exactly, with astronomy and
people that were getting
Galileo,
and they were getting ostracized from some of the churches for saying that the Earth is not the center of the universe. The Earth is not the center.
The Earth is flat, Tyler.
Yeah,
you know this, right?
Oh man, my goodness. And so Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, we were talking about earlier, and a lot of those inventions, because we really haven't had an Albert Einstein or an Edison or a Tesla
Not yet.
of our time. I personally, of course, feel like Elon Musk is that guy.
I agree.
As far as ideas, there's nobody can put a gun to your head and force you to have a good idea.
Right.
They can make you do something. The government can put a gun to your head and make you do physical things, but nobody can make you have a good idea. Those are born among great men and women that are few and far between.
Yep, I agree. And I think coming out of this, we're going to see a rebirth in really how we view ourselves, because we've taken things for granted for so long. I've taken your friendship for granted. I've taken our circle, our network for granted for so long. And I think coming out of this, I'm going to be glad to give somebody a hug at the end of this, shake their hand, look them in the eye and say, hey, I missed you. Or going to J. Wilson's, like our favorite places, and say, I miss my bartenders. I miss going to the grill.
Right.
I miss having drinks with my buddies at the grill,
Yeah.
And I think we need stuff like this every now and then. Not that I wish this on anybody, but I think we need something to get us back into that mindset of appreciating and loving each other. And I think that that's where we're at now, and that's what we need to make sure that when we come out of this, whenever it is, we'll be listening to this a year from now, sort of smiling at it. But I hope that we come out of this appreciating life a little bit more than what we have been.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I've been doing very good. I haven't left my house in about a week.
Us too.
I came up here, and the last person that was here 2 weeks ago was me, and I cleaned it. I was here with Texas Coffee Company, so I was pretty confident about the space, and none of us have been anywhere exhibiting any symptoms. And like I said, we came in here, we didn't even shake hands. So
yeah, it's weird.
But I'm worried about Houston becoming the next hot spot, maybe in the 1st of May, just because Texans don't like to be told what to do. And you see all these pictures of New York and Chicago and other countries that it's just empty. I mean, there's not a soul out there. And we both of us drove here. It looks pretty freaking normal.
Again, going back to episode 8, Texans throughout history do not like government. I was kind of one of those people when this thing first started, but now I'm starting to see, okay, this is serious. I need to start taking this seriously. And that was a few months ago, but historically we do not like being told stay home.
And luckily, we don't have a lot of public transportation in Texas. So,
No, thank
yeah, I
goodness.
mean, the subway in New York is already dirty.
Yeah.
So when you add infected people touching things, and you have to touch things all over the subway, or you're going to fall down.
That's the most disgusting place on the planet. By the
Yeah,
way.
you've either got to sit down or you've got to hold onto the rail.
Yeah.
Thing. And those things run 24/7. How many people touch that thing, right? In Texas, everybody kind of has their own transportation.
Yeah.
Everybody's in their own car, and they're just kind of going to drive-through food, or going to work if they're essential. There's so many disproportionately essential people down here because of the industry.
Yeah.
Chemical plants and oil refineries and oil and gas. They have to stay running because the rest of the rest of our country needs that oil and gas for infrastructure. The truckers,
Yep.
they still have to get supplies in the supply chain. So there is, still a lot of traffic on the road.
As somebody who contracts out to the oil and gas industry, in addition to the defense industry, what we're seeing for the company I work for, we're seeing an increase in requests for remote work. So how can you come do a cyber assessment at my facility or my ship remotely? And we're starting to see this innovation of, okay, all my employees are starting to think, innovatively now. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's make this checklist. Let's dial into their stuff, from remote. We're finding out we can do a lot of this stuff with, doing it remotely from our living room. So that's starting to save on travel. That's starting to save on exposure. We were traveling to the Middle East all over the place. So now we're safer.
You were traveling a lot.
Every week I was gone. I
Yeah.
haven't been in my house this long in years, and it's kind of nice.
Right. Yeah. I think it'll change lots of industries. Especially, I'm curious if they're going to keep the drive-through to go alcohol in Texas.
I hope to God they do, because I love this delivery at home from a liquor store. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's funny because they left liquor stores essential because they didn't want to create a black market and
Yes.
people doing private commerce amongst themselves, which is funny because Texas needs to get on board with marijuana. That's the same thing. If you want the black market to go away,
Just
then,
legalize. Yeah.
Yeah, decriminalize it. I'm sure Texas can capitalize on the agricultural benefit.
Oh,
we
God, yeah.
have the climate for it. So I think, and with the private sector as well, I think a lot of things are going to change. If you're
A lot of things are changing.
there may
already.
be some, and it's unfortunate, but there may be some companies that are able to work right now with just their essential skeleton crew, and that maybe they've laid off the non-essential workers, and the company's still doing okay. Well, that's going to be kind of scary for the non-essential people, because are they really needed? The employer that's got the ledger, that's looking at the bottom line, is going to say, maybe I don't need all these people. Maybe I could run the company a little bit leaner. Gary Vaynerchuk's one that said, I'll never have people work remotely. This was probably five years ago, right? And he's changed his mind. He 5 years ago, because he has a different mindset. He's about the hustle. He's about working the long hours, staying up late, doing your side hustle at night, staying up till 2 a.m. And he said people won't be as productive if they're working at home. You'll never get what you need out of them. And he's changed his tune because he's been forced to do that now because he's in New York. So he has, more stringent regulations than we do down here. And so now he's okay with it, and he's kind of explained why. And same thing for California. They're a little bit, some of those states are going to be a little stricter. Louisiana, our neighbor, is getting a little stricter on things.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I think Mardi Gras hurt them. Is what
Mardi Gras, and plus you have Bourbon Street. There's, I've been to Bourbon Street on a Monday night at 7:00, and there's just so many people there. It gets on my nerves and gives me a
well.
migraine.
Also, New Orleans, they've got a lot of risk factors. So
So many risk factors.
poverty and diabetes
Yeah.
can sometimes go hand in hand, and those are two big risk factors for this particular be
Yep.
susceptible to that disease. Because they're naturally
It's very crowded too.
crowded and immune deficient.
Right.
If you're poverty stricken or if you're homeless, your immunity is probably a little down because you're not able to have access to all the vitamins and minerals and healthcare and exercise and nutrition. So
Yeah. Yep. And something people are overlooking in this too, with regards to health, if you're stuck at home, is your mental health. Like, you have to maintain a routine, because a lot of people are coming to me because I'm still working, And going back to that production rate, I'm actually busier than I was when I was working in my office out of Houston. I'm nonstop, 7:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. I am nonstop, and sometimes I go till 10 or 11 at night, and I don't catch myself because I'm working from home.
Oh, right.
And I'm in my comfort zone. But
Yeah.
you know, you have to maintain a routine. And a lot of people are asking me, how do I adjust to this new work at home? I've been doing it for years as a defense contractor, and you just have to have a routine. You're going to get up 7:30 every day, do your routine, get your coffee, do your shower, all that stuff, and then knock off work at 5 p.m. Do something you want to do for you. Don't think about work. Don't do stuff that obviously we can't go out, but do something at home that you enjoy. I do, landscaping, working on my house. I paint,
Right.
things like that. So
All those projects that are half finished should completely be done.
do them.
Do-
Yeah.
do
If
all
you
those
guys
projects.
come out of this half finished projects, then you,
Yeah. I mean, I love piddling around project.
and we were talking about that last night, I think, on
yeah.
a FaceTime.
Yeah, I think the last FaceTime that we had together with all the fellas, I was in my tool shed organizing the shed, and that had been like an ongoing project that never, and it got done so fast. It got done in that the entirety of that call
Yeah.
was probably 30 minutes, and I finished it, and I would chat with you guys, and I would disappear for a little bit, put some tools away. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
But now's the time. If you're out of shape and you want to get in shape, do it. Stop talking and get up and do something and go out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go out to do stuff.
Right.
Get in shape, do stuff.
Was there anything else you had in your notes that you wanted to share with everybody?
I think we've covered it. The plagues throughout history have, while we're going through it, it sucks. We can't go anywhere. We're quarantined. But the big key takeaway is quarantines aren't new. Government imposing quarantines are not new. This comes from the beginning of time. It's something that humans have gone through throughout history. And if our ancestors can do it, then we can do it. We need to maintain that, that sort of blitz spirit that the British had during World War II. It sucks while we're going through it, but we're going to get through it. And when we come out of it, there's going to be a renaissance. There's going to be people embracing each other, loving more than we were before March 2020. And I think that's where we're going to be when we come out of this. And we just need to look forward to that day when we can start doing that again.
Sure.
So
All right. Well, I got the hand sanitizer on deck. We're gonna wipe
we're going
everything.
to wipe everything.
Wipe everything down and head out. We'll if we are still here next year, then we will do this again.
We'll do a 1 year on April 2nd, 2021.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Well, it's time to take our elderberry, eat our vitamins, and say our prayers. We'll see everybody next time.
Be safe, guys. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. God.